Welcome to Frost & Sullivan's Growth, Innovation, and Leadership Briefing. Today's event is titled Cybersecurity in Healthcare: 3 Ways Organizations Can Mitigate Security Risk. Our presenter today is Mike Jude, Research Manager for our Digital Health Practice here at Frost & Sullivan. And it is our pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Erin, Benson, Director of Market Planning Healthcare, LexisNexis. With that, I would now like to hand the presentation over to Mike.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks so much for making this venue available to my research team. The Growth, Innovation, and Leadership team helps our analysts engage with the marketplace, with our clients, and with other interested parties, and allows us to review some of the new research that we've developed, and also, as Anna indicated, to introduce people that we think are the movers and shakers in the marketplace, the deep thinkers. And so I'm very much appreciative of Erin and her participation today as well. This presentation is largely based upon a report that we finished a couple of months ago on cybersecurity in healthcare. And consequently, it is a reflection of those findings that we had as we conducted our research, as well as some of the observations that some of our internal experts have made on this space. This isn't necessarily comprehensive with respect to that report, and I would encourage our clients and other interested parties, if they want to see the full report, to get in touch with us. A little bit of a review on what we're going to do today. First, we'll cover the cybersecurity threat to healthcare, and I'm only going to go over this very briefly because I know Erin has a lot more information on the subject. We'll take a look at the market for cybersecurity solutions, speak a little bit about the points of vulnerability that actually cause the cybersecurity problem in healthcare, and then we'll discuss 3 ways that organizations can mitigate the risks, and I won't dwell on it, but essentially we're advocating strategic planning, an integrated approach to cybersecurity, and engaging with trusted partners. And then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Erin, who will talk about the role of data in digital health, which is very heavily impactive on cybersecurity. And I had to find my cursor there, sorry. So before we get started on that, I'm going to turn this back over to Anna to talk about a poll that will run during the course of this presentation and whose results we'll review at the end. Anna?
Thank you, Mike. Yes, audience, I have pushed out several poll questions that we have available, so if you can take a moment throughout the session and select your answers, either yes or no. Do you believe your cybersecurity posture is sufficient? Do you plan to increase your cybersecurity spending? And would you consider using a managed cybersecurity services company? So just take a moment, select your answer, and we'll review all these results later in the presentation. So I'm going to hand it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Anna. So let's get started here. I don't think anybody on the call doubts that the cyber security threat is increasing. Healthcare especially is setting records for breaches and is on track this year to exceed the number of breaches that we had last year. As a matter of fact, when I pulled the stats from the when I pulled the stats from the Civil Rights Office of Health and Human Services, at that point in time, the beginning of June, we already had 196 significant breaches. And you can see the breakdown here. 2/3 of the total number of breaches are coming from healthcare providers. The other segments you can see here, it's not a good story. It's effectively a disaster, and it's apparently not getting any better. But there is good news in all of this, I guess, and that is that the healthcare cybersecurity market is a growing market. If you're in the business of providing cybersecurity solutions, you can expect a significant growth between now and the end of this projection period. So in 2023, we're saying that the healthcare cybersecurity market is going to be somewhere north of $8 billion in the United States alone, with CAGR from now until then of about 10.3%. If you were in the cybersecurity space and looking at the number of breaches, this would all be, very good business for you. But for the rest of us who are in the business of delivering healthcare services using, automation communications, this is very bad news indeed. Now, in terms of the points of vulnerability, obviously there are many places where cybersecurity is applicable, where healthcare IT is vulnerable. With respect to how we look at it here in Frost & Sullivan, we have a cybersecurity team in our ICT market BU that subdivides cybersecurity into basically 5 buckets. There's actually a 6th bucket that we'll talk about a little bit later, but primarily we're talking about things like network perimeter protection, which is pretty much what it sounds like. We're looking at endpoint protection, which is especially applicable to things like IoT, securing all these new devices that are in the network. Looking at end user access, providing integrated security across multiple devices. This is a primary source of breaches. Public-facing properties, that would be the new web portals that we're all building to allow patients access to their health information and to, access healthcare services. And then finally, detecting and responding to exploits, which is essentially the forensics associated with what happens when you discover that you have a breach. How can you detect it quickly? How can you do something about it? And what we've looked at here is, regarding the last slide that we had showing market growth, basically between now and 2023, we're talking about $5.6 billion in new revenue opportunities associated with these various areas. And you can see on this slide the breakdown associated with each one. Clearly, these are all growth markets if you're betting on cybersecurity solutions. Let's go to the next slide here. So in the course of doing this research, we discovered that there are a number of different ways that you can address cybersecurity, and it sort of implied several innovative business models. These are not necessarily the only solutions associated with getting a handle on cybersecurity, but they present some interesting notions in terms of where you could go to address cybersecurity. And the first one that we show here is integrated security into the clinical workflow. This is the notion that instead of using access and authentication for every application and for every device, that you build security into the clinical workflow so that you can do things like single sign-on, reducing the load on physicians. And one of our clients is actually doing things along these lines. Imprivata is looking at how you would take authentication and basically manage it centrally so that physicians don't have to spend a great deal of time authenticating to every device or application. Another one is leveraging patient data to ensure access and privacy. Clearly we know our patients. We have a lot of information on them. LexisNexis is taking the lead in terms of looking at ways to leverage some of that data to do things like security and some other things. And then, finally, the extreme is to encrypt everything. Certainly HIPAA rules are pushing the industry in the direction of encryption. But if you think about it, if all the data is encrypted, it doesn't really matter if you lose it because you can't do anything with it anyway. One of our clients, StrongKey, is advocating that and is developing processes for approaching that. Obviously, encrypting everything has its own problems, which is managing keys and ensuring that the appropriate people have access to keys. So what kind of an ecosystem are we talking about in cybersecurity? Currently, my team is tracking well over 500 security solution providers, and generally in the healthcare space, almost that many. And the last time I looked at the list that we're maintaining, it's somewhere short of 600 security solution providers. So it's a massive market. There are lots and lots of point solutions. And there's really no market dominance in healthcare. Yes, there are very large cybersecurity solution providers, but not a tremendous amount of dominance in the healthcare market vertical. So, that implies that a couple of things. First of all, it implies that this market is primed for mergers and acquisitions. And so we do expect a lot of consolidation in the market as smaller players are basically acquired by the larger players that, we see, portfolios of security solutions rather than point solutions. And because there are so many security solutions out there, it's sucking all of the wind out of the cybersecurity expertise market. So it's becoming harder and harder to actually hire specialists in the cybersecurity space. Consequently, it's driving up the price to acquire those individuals. It's making it harder for individual health IT organizations to acquire the necessary expertise to address cybersecurity comprehensively. And as a consequence, we believe that this is going to drive a market for trusted partners who can, first of all, help plan security strategies, and secondly, maybe even manage or maintain the cybersecurity solutions for health IT organizations. So this is where the managed services market comes in. There's a growing market for that across all market verticals, but we're seeing a lot more interest in the healthcare space for managed cybersecurity solutions. So this brings us to generally to three different ways to mitigate risk, and I mentioned those in the introduction. But the first one is simply to start planning for cybersecurity. We've discovered in surveys that we've run that although many health IT organizations talk in terms of planning for cybersecurity, most don't really have comprehensive security plans. This is largely, I think, an artifact of the fact that cybersecurity expertise is hard to get, and secondly, that the threat is evolving so quickly. But as you can see from this little chart here, it's almost a Pareto analysis, looking at your entire infrastructure, looking at the points of vulnerability, assigning a risk quotient to each one of those points, and getting at least a snapshot idea of where your points of vulnerability are and how likely it is that they'll be exploited. That certainly gives you an idea of where to invest your money if you're going with point solutions, and it definitely provides a basis for management activities once you have the software and hardware necessary to do cybersecurity. Second way is just to focus on an integrated approach to cybersecurity. As I noted before, you can either secure every point of vulnerability with a point solution, or you can look for a more comprehensive package of solutions or a solution set that basically addresses cybersecurity across all points of vulnerability. So point solutions increase overhead, maintenance. We all know what point solutions do. And, in many cases, it leaves vulnerable gaps, especially the notion of system and application upgrades. When cybersecurity solutions get upgraded, sometimes they're out of sync with other solutions. And so it's a constant headache to maintain a portfolio of different point solutions if that's the approach that you take. So we think that where you can go with an integrated solution set, you're better off. And, I mentioned it before, but, if you're doing things like integrated security for authentication purposes, then you can do interesting things like single sign-on. We did a study not too long ago where we discovered that just doing single sign-on can radically reduce the workload on clinicians and physicians to the tune of days worth of even weeks worth of time during the course of a clinical work year. Additionally, there's the impact of authentication that most people don't talk about, which is the notion of task switching. So when you are a physician and you're going to see a patient and you have to stop and authenticate, there's that period of time where you're thinking about authentication and not the patient, and then you have to get back to thinking about the patient. That doesn't necessarily stop your effectiveness, but it seriously degrades your effectiveness, and so it's something to think about. And then finally, engaging with trusted partners. As I indicated before, a lot of the cybersecurity expertise is now with the vendor community. But that can be good because if you find trusted partners that you can engage with that have the expertise necessary to evaluate where you are and help you develop solutions, then that's a good thing. So this is an area where you can definitely leverage the expertise of your vendors. If you have trusted vendors that can help you do this, that's a good thing to do. Managed security services obviously is one way to externalize your overheads and at the same time leverage the expertise that they have to develop comprehensive security plans. So what are the implications of all this? As I indicated before, 2019 is on target to be one of the worst on record for healthcare data breaches. The impact of poor cybersecurity now is at a business threatening level, not just the potential for fines or lost business, but the potential for harming patients. So it's something that we definitely have to get our hands on. But simply increasing spending on cybersecurity is not the answer because healthcare is well behind the power curve generally when it comes to keeping up with the threat. So even if we double or triple our spending, it's unlikely for most of us that we're going to be able to catch up with the threat. So what we have to do is we have to get ahead of the threat by developing security plans that allow us to identify where we're vulnerable. We need to look for solutions that solve more than one problem that tend to enable an integrated approach across all applications and services. And then finally, finding trusted partners that we can partner with to leverage their expertise to come up to speed on our cybersecurity. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Erin Benson, who's Director of Product Market Planning for LexisNexis Healthcare. And she's going to talk to us about data's role in digital health. Erin?
Great. Thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this topic with you all today. So LexisNexis, we've been partnering with organizations for decades to address identity management challenges, and this includes identity verification and authentication to best protect that healthcare data. The Frost & Sullivan findings highlight the importance of developing a strategic plan for cybersecurity in order to proactively address this threat, and also the need to focus on a solution that can be integrated with your workflow. We're fully in support with this, and we also recognize that the goals of cybersecurity could sometimes seem a little bit at odds with other organizational goals around patient engagement. With the rise of consumerism and value-based care driving a need to provide patients with a quality experience without introducing a lot of friction into the process, it does seem at odds because cybersecurity calls for more secure access gates, whereas patient engagement needs call for more ease of use of online portals and other healthcare services. So I wanted to reinforce what Mike has already shared and then provide you with some ideas on how healthcare organizations can balance that need for data security with patient engagement when creating a cybersecurity strategy. So to put cybersecurity in the context of healthcare workflows, there's no denying technology has played a primary role in how patients are taking control of their health. Patients now access healthcare services through mobile apps, telemedicine, patient portals, wearable devices, and other digital formats. and they complete activities like viewing medical records and lab results, communicating with physicians, scheduling appointments, requesting prescription refills, all from the comfort of their own homes. So in turn, these increasingly digital interactions are requiring healthcare organizations to take a more proactive role in protecting their systems from a breach while maintaining a great patient experience. As digital healthcare has become the new norm and patients are accessing medical data in a variety of ways, this has resulted in more attack points for hackers. In fact, any point in a system where an employee, a vendor, a member, a patient, or any other type of user has the opportunity to gain access, hackers manipulate these vulnerabilities to gain access to systems, to steal patient identities, gain access to healthcare services or prescriptions, open new lines of credit, facilitate blackmail or extortion, or other reasons. The reason that healthcare organizations seem to be a primary target is because they tend to have outdated systems, lower levels of security, and are statistically known to pay ransom and ransomware attacks as opposed to other companies and other industries. So if we look at how big the demand is for digital health options and how big the threat is, I just wanted to share a few additional statistics. In terms of demand, 52% of individuals now have the opportunity to access their health record online according to Health IT, and over 70% of millennials prefer to share their health data and manage their care via a mobile app. The increasingly omni-channel model of healthcare allows access through both physical and digital channels, so patients can still show up in person at hospitals and call centers, or call in their call centers, or they can access services online via email, computer, or tablet, and through mobile applications. So this demand for digital health options is going to continue to grow. When we then look at the size of the threat, there's a few more statistics I wanted to add to what Mike has shared. Because of the ways in which patients access their health data becomes more sophisticated, so too are the ways that hackers are finding to commit fraud. So looking back in 2017, there were 477 U.S. healthcare breaches. More than 1 in 10 new account openings are fraudulent, with 60% of those accounts being created using a mobile device. There's been a 202% growth in login attacks since 2016, and 88% of all ransomware attacks were against healthcare organizations in 2017. When fraudsters are successful, it compromises the patient's trust in their healthcare organization, increases costs for the healthcare organization if they have to remediate a breach, and potentially leads to patient safety risks if any of the patient's health data is altered as a result of that breach, and caregivers then act on bad information. So I suspect by now it's alarmingly clear that cybersecurity has to be addressed. But what was interesting is that not all of your peers recognize that need. In April of this year, LexisNexis commissioned a survey on more than 100 healthcare organizations about their cybersecurity strategies, and I wanted to share some of the results. And it'll be interesting, too, to see how those compare to the results from your survey later on. So in our survey results, 58% of healthcare organizations expressed that they believe the cybersecurity of their online patient portal is above average. What Mike shared with you and the previous statistics I've shared show that can't possibly be true given the growing number of breaches. Another finding was that 56% of healthcare organizations surveyed believe the main reason patients don't use online portals is because they're uncomfortable with the technology. This didn't sound unreasonable, so we wanted to look for evidence, and what we found was a University of Michigan study that found that patient portal adoption for patients between the ages of 50 and 80 ranged from 49 to 52%. So even this older population, what seemed to be the least likely to adopt these new technologies, was showing a desire for online options. When we asked what portal authentication methods that these healthcare organizations were leveraging to secure their patients' data, 93% of them stated they were using a username and password. Only 39% said they were using knowledge-based authentication, 38% using email verification, and 13% deploying some kind of device authentication. Since fraudsters are becoming increasingly sophisticated at hacking and breaking into our systems, we strongly encourage multi-factor authentication in order to address the different types of fraud. It's becoming really clear that one type of security is not enough. For example, in the first quarter of last year, there was a record 1 billion bot attacks, where bots were testing thousands of username and password combinations within seconds, looking for the right combination to access a portal or a system. So for those organizations in our study that were only utilizing username and password, their data would have been at extreme risk of being hacked. One final finding from the survey was that 65% of healthcare organizations stated that their patient identity management budget or cybersecurity budget will not change or will decrease this year. I found this interesting because of the fact that it can have such a financial impact on the organization when a breach occurs. Data breaches cost healthcare organizations directly in terms of recovery and remediation costs, but also indirectly in terms of loss of productivity, reputational damage, and service disruption. So although I know that budgets can be tight, I fully agree that this should be an area that gets thoughtful investment, and it may not be increasing it, but it is making sure that it's addressing multiple types of security. So the bottom line is that we know that patients need to get access to their health data, and that by playing a bigger role in managing their own health, it helps to improve their health outcomes. There's evidence to support the benefits of digital access to healthcare, such as portal access being correlated with a reduction in readmissions. But we can only accomplish this by gaining and maintaining patient trust. For example, Health IT article reported that 25% of patients that failed to access their account stated the reason was due to their concern about the privacy and security of online medical records. So this leads to the question, how do we create a cybersecurity strategy that meets the needs of data security and meets the needs of patient engagement? At LexisNexis, we see identity as the key to finding this balance in today's digital economy. Identity management and proofing, in tandem with new technological innovations, allows organizations to perform intuitive linking of data points to the accurate identity, leverage cross-industry analytics to determine if a patient actually exists and if all of the identity information entered by the user is accurate and belongs together, and monitor transaction activity across industries, including the financial, retail, insurance, and government industries, using machine learning to build analytics and provide fraud intelligence. So by having the ability to address and link data points like username and email address, biometrics, geolocation, and a person's digital behavior and reputation across industries to phone numbers, addresses, dates of birth, and relatives and associates, this is key in protecting your patient population. Basically, in order to protect their data, you have to know who to grant access to and be able to verify their identities. Knowing your patients will allow you to validate the right users get access to their information while keeping the fraudsters out. So to put identity management intelligence into action, we recommend building a multi-layered security approach to implement throughout your workflow, whether it be when they're entering portals or if it's looking at where vendors are entering different systems or even employees. Again, it's any point of access to your systems. The goal here is to build the right level of verification and authentication across the workflow so that the right patients get through with little to no friction and the fraudsters are kept out, hitting several security blocks due to the detection of synthetic or manufactured identity information or their lack of proof that they are who they say they are. So I'm going to briefly walk through some of the identity verification layer options, and then we'll talk through some best practices. The first layer is contextual, based on how a patient interacts with your site, your portal, or your mobile application. This layer is a great first line of defense against fraudsters and is completely frictionless to the patient. It analyzes the device being used to access your site or mobile application and the behavior of the person as they maneuver through your site. It looks for patterns that would indicate whether or not they are a regular user, a fraudster, or some type of technical threat like a bot. The second layer is based on how well the patient's information compares to others. Here's where public and proprietary information paired with linking technology is leveraged to determine if the input data being presented is representative of the actual identity and if that information belongs together. The third layer leverages something you are. So this is where biometric technology comes in. It uses voice recognition or fingerprint scanning to authenticate an identity. The fourth layer is contributory. So this leverages what others know about you. So by collecting data from other organizations and other industries to monitor when or if an identity has been seen throughout the network, how frequently, and if the identity was involved in any past fraudulent activity. Because the interesting thing is, if a fraudster commits fraud in one industry, they're likely to do it in another. Next is possession-based. It leverages what the patient already has, like their email address, their phone number, or a government-issued ID like a license or passport, to verify their identity. It tests whether the ID is real or if the email or phone number receiving a one-time password is valid and belongs to the person who's requesting access. Finally, there's knowledge-based, which leverages information that only the true person should readily know about themselves to authenticate their identity. So even though I've presented 5 different options for the types of security layers in a multi-factor authentication approach, it's important to keep in mind that not all the layers are necessary for every type of transaction. The layers in a multi-layered approach should be customized to your specific workflow and use case, and they should achieve balance by pairing low friction and high security solutions. So for example, in healthcare, if you're looking at a new account opening on a portal, you might want to assess the device being used to create the account, validate the information entered by the user matches to the right identities information in public records, and present a knowledge-based authentication quiz to make sure the person creating the account is who they say they are. For a login use case, you would still want to assess the device being used to log in, but then you might want to compare that identity to known fraud lists from various industries to see if they've been flagged before. And finally, if anything flags as suspicious, you could do a one-time password sent to the identity's verified phone number. So for both of these examples, it wasn't necessary to send a patient through all 5 layers of security, but we do recommend at least 2 or 3 with step-up authentication options per transaction type because there are different types of fraud that you're trying to stop. We also recommend putting the lower friction options, which are those that occur behind the scenes, like device and behavioral assessment, first in the process. This minimizes the inconvenience to your patients because they can be validated quickly without really having to interact with the security layers. Step-up authentication can then be used when earlier layers of security detect suspicious anomalies. This provides a second opportunity for the real patients to validate their identities and enter the system, but also introduces more friction that can ultimately stop your would-be fraudsters. So as I wrap up, I just want to emphasize once more that cybersecurity isn't a policy that just lives in a vacuum in an IT department somewhere. It's an essential part of doing business, of building the trust that's needed to advance patient engagement in the digital age. So the CISO at Christiana Care Health System emphasized this by saying, I believe that information security is a patient safety issue, and I think a lot of organizations are just starting to think about it as not just a risk to a patient's information, but a risk to a patient's life. Bad information in a medical record could actually kill someone. Another IT executive who participated in our Chime survey this year said that patients will go somewhere else because they don't trust that you can take care of their data. So I hope today's presentation is giving you some important insights to achieving that trust through a multi-factor authentication cybersecurity strategy. And Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, Erin. Thanks so much. Very interesting presentation. And I'm very gratified as an analyst to see that your findings tend to reinforce the findings that we've found in our research. So I think the telemetry from the market is actually pretty consistent and just illustrates the importance of addressing this problem because, as I indicated, it's not going to get better. At this point in time, before we take questions from the audience, I'd like to turn it back over to Anna to talk about the polling results.
Very well. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, Mike. So these are our results. Our first poll question. We have 25% of our audience indicated yes, and 75% of our audience indicated no when we asked, do you believe your cybersecurity posture is sufficient? Our second poll question here, do you plan to increase your cybersecurity spending? 100% of our audience indicated yes. And our third poll question, would you consider using a managed cybersecurity services company? 66% indicated no, and 33% indicated yes.
Fascinating. Interesting results, but I think that the first response is telling. 75% of the people in our audience believe that we can do more for cybersecurity. So I think that within this audience and the presenters anyway, I think there's unanimity of agreement that this is a problem that we need to address. And now I think we're ready for some questions.
Very well, thank you, Mike. So our first question here, this is for Erin. Erin, why do you think there are such disparities in organizations' confidence in their cybersecurity strategies and cost impact of real breaches attacks? Where is the disconnect?
Yeah, I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see on this call that with our survey here that they are recognizing the strategies aren't sufficient. That definitely lines up better with the data than some of the survey results that we saw. I think where the discrepancy is that we are seeing a lot more adoption of multi-factor authentication, but there's so many different types of fraud, and as Mike alluded to, so many different options that it's hard to find what's the right pairing of different security solutions. And so there tends to be an understanding that if they have anything in place, that they've protected the system. I think doing a more thorough evaluation of the different types of fraud and making sure that you've got different types of solutions to address the most common types is where there could be room for improvement.
Thank you, Erin. So, Mike, you mentioned encryption as being a potential solution to cybersecurity. Why isn't encryption used more than it currently is?
Well, it's a really good question, and I think there are several reasons why you don't see more encryption being used. The first one is that encryption has a reputation for complexity, and in fact, in many cases, that's well deserved because we're essentially looking back in time at points where applying encryption keys and maintaining those and putting in the technology was a complicated exercise. But in today's world, encryption is more often than not the use of appliances to do encryption on the fly. But we still have the problem, which I think is the second reason why people don't use encryption more. We have the problem of controlling keys. Who has access to the information? Who has access to the decryption keys? What happens if somebody leaves? How do you maintain the key system? And so at the end of the day, I think people look at it and say, it's going to introduce a huge amount of complexity. I don't really understand it very well, and so consequently, it's something that we'll consider and maybe use in special cases. But, I think ultimately that's where we're going. I think that ultimately encryption is the only way we're going to absolutely safeguard data. But it's not being used right now because I think there's just, the assumption that it's complex. It's going to take a lot of effort to make it work.
Thank you. Now, Erin, how can an organization face the challenge of identity authentication solutions and integration with an EHRs like Epic?
Yeah, so we get a lot of questions around how do we make this more seamless in terms of putting it just at the front of patient login portals so that it's not like you're going to a separate site to authenticate your identity before you can log in. So we work with organizations to build it into all of their client-specific websites. But when you look at the big EHR groups like Epic, they are partnering with organizations that make it easy to turn this kind of capability on and off within, for example, Epic's MyChart. So that can be a way to get a quicker, path to finding cybersecurity is looking at if your EHR vendor already has access to some of these cybersecurity capabilities built in.
Very well, thank you, Erin. So with limited IT budgets, how will healthcare IT organizations get ahead of the threat curve?
I'll take a whack at that. It's true that healthcare IT budgets have been restrained. The growth in healthcare IT spending has been less than some other market verticals. And so I think that what we see at Frost is if it's simply a matter of spending money to try and get ahead of the curve, that's not going to work. Like I say, there are many, many solutions out there trying to choose the best solutions and then trying to make it work with all the other solutions. it's a fool's errand because basically the threat can outspend any market vertical and discover exploits faster than we can plug the gaps. So I think that the key to getting ahead is to spend your money differently. I think that as I suggested, some ways to do that are to look for integrated solutions rather than point solutions, to work with perhaps partners who can provide a portfolio of solutions that work well together. Ultimately looking at a more efficient spend dynamic. Now, Frost & Sullivan also projected an increase in revenue in this market. And how's that possible if budgets are constrained and spending is also constrained? I think the key here is that as we look to the future, with more integrated IT environments that are using things like big data and cloud and managed services and so forth, we're going to have the opportunity to externalize some of our costs and invest in other areas. And so looking at this from a sort of holistic standpoint, I think basically we believe that budgets will reflect a change in sort of IT architecture where many of the fixed costs now are externalized. Some of the other costs are managed by third parties as well. So we think that the budgets may be constrained, but we can apply them probably more intelligently, and we think that'll happen going forward.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that I think in the past IT has been seen really separate from like member experience or patient engagement areas, and we're seeing a lot more cross-collaboration, which has actually meant that sometimes like other department budgets can also go to support some of these activities, which may be a way that can help to supplement some of that.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Very well. Our next question here. Healthcare involves different actors, healthcare providers, doctors, and healthcare insurance companies. Are you finding more cybersecurity issues, challenges with providers or insurance companies?
I can take an initial whack at that, but Erin, I think I'd like you to weigh in as well. I think from our perspective, just looking at what is happening out there, we see that the providers are definitely at the tip of the spear when it comes to the threat. Principally because healthcare providers have many points of vulnerability associated with patient access, whereas some of the others might not. Also, the healthcare provider space involves many large players, but also many medium-sized and small players. And the smaller the player, the more likely it is that the security is going to be less than effective. So, we definitely kind of see it as being, a provider problem, at least initially. Erin?
Yeah, no, it definitely is a bigger problem within the provider community. For one, with the survey, at least that we did of the 100 healthcare organizations, it included providers and insurance companies, and it seemed like the insurance companies had maybe invested a little bit earlier on in some of the multi-factor authentication solutions, so they just have some stronger systems in place, whereas a lot of providers are still implementing their EHR systems and adding cybersecurity systems on top of that, so they're just kind of a little bit behind on that curve. But I think your point is accurate as well, which is that there's a lot more with providers having different access points, and there's also just a lot more interesting data to fraudsters within providers. They can get access to medical records and labs and things like that that may not be available through an insurance company. And unfortunately, given the number of breaches that have happened in other areas, things like Social Security number is somewhat of a commodity on the black market, whereas medical data is still really interesting to fraudsters and people looking to buy that type of data, so that makes providers more vulnerable.
Our next question here, What do you think will be the tipping point that makes HCOs spend sufficiently on cybersecurity versus continually cutting budgets?
Well, I think from my perspective, it's clear that we're evolving to some significant breach that is going to basically capture the attention of everybody. Typically you see things like investing in security being sort of secondary until there's really such a significant breach that it perhaps leads to the collapse of a company or some other really, really bad outcome. So I hate to be a pessimist here, but I think that there's really going to have to be a major event that captures everybody's attention before some of the players in the space take cybersecurity as seriously as they could.
Thank you, Mike. And I just wanted to remind our audience, under the Attachments tab at the bottom of your webinar player, we have some websites, some link to some websites that you can find out more information on growth, questions on our growth opportunities in your industry. Also, we have a website on the state of the patient identity management from LexisNexis, and also a document on the new face of cybersecurity. So we have time for one more question, so let's go ahead and finish this here. HIMSS surveys indicate that most healthcare IT organizations feel their security is adequate. How would you respond to this?
Well, I think that Erin actually discussed this in some depth, as to, why we think perhaps, that our security is better than it really is I think that, some of it is wishful thinking. It's that we haven't had, a particular player might say, we haven't had a major event, consequently, it's not that big an issue. We must be doing a fairly good job. But it's not a question of if. It's a question of when. The threat is increasing almost. I won't say exponentially because that's an exaggeration, but it's increasing at a better than linear rate over time. And so I think kidding ourselves that our security is better than it really is just doing everybody a disservice. So, there are political reasons for thinking or asserting that your security is good. There are even regulatory reasons why you might assert that your security is good, when it comes time to explain yourself, to an investigator. But I think that the reality of it, and it's illustrated every single day with breach reports, is that our security isn't. So I think if you think about it clearly, you realize that in fact our security collectively could be a whole lot better. So Erin, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's exactly what's occurring.
So, anyway,
Very
back
well.
to you, Anna.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to end the session, but I'd like to once again thank Erin Benson for joining us today. If you do have any further questions for Mike about the briefing or would like to speak to him one-on-one, I have posted some contact details that are appearing on your screen at this time. And this concludes today's presentation. We hope you found today's webinar informative. We want to thank you for your time today.